Good morning to you and welcome to Front Page Review, all right here on Voice of the People, 96.1 FM. It's Friday and it's the Friday edition of the Front Page Review. Today we're stepping it down a notch, but we'll be looking at a lot of headlines this morning. Of course, the news doesn't step down, it just keeps getting better and better. We've got a lot of headlines to check out this morning, but before that, I am Gesire Agua.
And I am Simeon Sunday. Welcome to the show. And talking about the headlines we'll be going through today this morning, we'll be checking out headlines from The Punch, Guardian, Nigerian Tribune, Sun, as well as This Day newspaper and The Nation. And as always, at 7:30 a.m., we will be joined by Rufai Oseni, joining us in analyzing some of the headlines we'll be touching on this Friday morning. And of course, even though it's a weekend, the news doesn't stop, as Gessi has said. We'll be going through them. And let's start with this particular one. I saw this particular story, quite sad, especially for us as Nigerians. As much as Nigerians were in a celebratory mood yesterday after the victory of the Nigerian Super Eagles over Bafana in South Africa, some Nigerians actually lost their lives, while watching that game as well.
Yes.
And according to some headlines on The Punch, it says APC stalwart Ojugbo, 4 others die watching the Eagles South Africa penalties. And of course, no fewer than 5 Nigerians reportedly died while watching the penalty shootout between Nigeria Super Eagles and Bafana of South Africa during the semi-final match at the ongoing Africa Cup of Nations in Abuja on Wednesday. And those who died include an APC stalwart, Dr. Cairo Ojugbo, also the deputy bossa of Kwara State University, Alhaji Ayuba Abdullahi, as well as a sales representative, Mikhail Osundiji, a serving NYSC member, identified simply as Samuel, and also an Anambra-born businessman who is even based in Ivory Coast, Osondu Nwoye. Tributes have been pouring in for these individuals, especially for the Anambra-born businessman, Osondu Nwoye. We've seen some key individuals who have actually paid last respect to him. Some even had to write a very, how should I put it, an epic message for this individual. It is quite sad, seeing that happen.
It's sad, but I mean, it was an interesting match that they had to watch. So if they had to die watching that, I'd say it was a good one. It wasn't too bad an experience, right? What I mean is the match was a good match.
I understand.
It was a good match, but it's a sad event that happened. But still following the reactions from the Bafana Super Eagles match, there's been some threats to Super Eagles goalkeeper Nwabali. Some South Africans have said, don't come back. They've threatened Super Eagles goalkeeper Stanley Nwabali, who plays for Chippa United in South Africa, and he's reportedly received threats from South African fans following his standout performance against the country. The South African fans reportedly warned him against returning to his club after AFCON. Former Super Eagles international Ida Peterside has revealed the threats while speaking on Channels Television yesterday, stating that some fans have warned Nwabali not to go back to Chippa United in South Africa after the AFCON tournament. While the threat has not been reported, it's believed that some South Africans are displeased with Nwabali's role in preventing their team from reaching the finals. Peterside said, the biggest problem we have had is that we have gotten some messages where people have sent messages to the goalkeeper threatening him. I hear some people are telling him not to come back to South Africa since he didn't want them to score. We've not heard of any violence, but just threats so far. They've been threatening him and threatening some other people as well. Looking at this, what do you think, Simeon?
It is quite sad, where the football has actually taken us. We know that as Nigerians and even as people of the world, we have this love for football. Not just Nigerians, but it's really sad when something that should unite us as Africans is actually what is tearing us apart. I've seen a couple of comments on social media, with bad bantas and all of that, I didn't expect it to get to the point where there will be threat to life as a result of that. And sometimes, something actually happened just before the Nigerian
thing that should be bringing us together is what is tearing us. And you can reach us on WhatsApp
via the number 0700 010 961 961 0700 010-961-961. And remember, you can also send a voice note or put a call across to us via the same number. And now let's get back, to more trending headline. And of course, let's talk about the lead story, reoccurring across several newspaper platforms at the moment. On the Punch newspaper, and that's the top story, says 14-day strike notice. Federal government, Labour, defer on aborted peace deal. A 14-day strike notice, federal government, Labour, defer on aborted, peace deal. The federal government just on Thursday disagreed with the organized Labour on its threat to declare a nationwide strike in the next 14 days over the alleged failure of the government to implement the memorandum of understanding reached with the NLC and the TUC sometime in October 2023. The Minister of Information and National Orientation, Mohammed Idris, in an interview with The Punch, asked the unions to exercise restraint and allow the government to address their grievances. And that is what is happening right now. And of course, Idris, declined to comment on whether the government will seek a court injunction to stop the strike or not. So we all know that the whole drama with, the organized labor talking about NLC and TUC started, just moments after the announcement of the removal of fuel subsidy. And we saw, earlier, the labor unions, sometime in September, give the federal government a 16-point agreement, on what they wanted the federal government to do. But so far, the labor unions are saying part and bulk of what they required and demanded from the president hasn't been done. Hence, they've actually given the president 14 days notice. Hence, they will, take part in an indefinite strike that will shut down all aspects of Nigeria's economy.
At this point in time, we've seen this play out time and time again. Nigeria, the federal government has always gone loggerheads with labor, especially as regards paying them the wages that was promised by the federal government. There's some of the other things that federal government also promised labor that they almost always renege on. Why is it that we've signed an MOU, we threatened strike, you force us to come to a negotiating table. We come to the table and in good faith we come to the table and we're hoping that you do your own part of the agreement and you renege. Now we're seeing that the government had agreed to pay 35,000 naira to all federal workers beginning from last year September, pending when a new national minimum wage was expected to have been signed into law. And then there was also a promise that the wage award would be paid to federal workers for 6 months, while states were also encouraged to extend the same benefit to workers as well. The federal government had promised that they were going to provide 100 CNG buses nationwide. This was to ease the high transportation costs. Now we're seeing Labour faulting the government in this. Why do we have this particular situation where government enters signs an MOU with Labour, and then we see the federal government dancing to a different tune after some months? Why do we see this?
It's pathetic. At the end of the day, I would have borrowed the word from Omaomi, who actually said, if you ask me, now who I go ask, because these are key questions a lot of Nigerians are asking at the moment. And of course, the response is meant to come from this administration. And of course, we are praying and hoping that we don't see the strike, come through or pull through, because we know what it is, especially when all the labor unions come together. The previous, strike they had sometime last year did not really have its effect because the TUC pulled out,
yes.
Out of the strike, and it was just the NLC NLC,
NLC.
that took part in that particular strike. But this time, we've seen the TUC in solidarity with the NLC saying they are going on a strike. And of course, if TUC and NLC wants to go on a strike, you know the implication on Nigeria's economy, right?
But Simeon, when you look at the NLC and the TUC, is it only to issue an ultimatum? Every single time we hear from the TUC and the NLC, they are issuing a 14-day warning strike. Is that the only weapon in their arsenal?
Truth be told, before you take an action, you need to give the federal government some time. You just don't wake up.
My point is, why is it always a strike? That is the thing that they can use. There's so many other things you can use. Why strike? Aren't you watering down the effect of a proposed strike? It's now an everyday thing. Every other day we're hearing the NLC come out to say, we're issuing an ultimatum, and then a 14-day strike is proposed. Every other day we're hearing a proposed strike, and then the federal government will say, yeah, you people should come and sit down, let's talk about this, and then they water it down again, and after a few months we see the proposed strike rearing its ugly head once again. Aren't we watching the effects?
I understand
of the threats.
I understand the point you're making, because a lot of people are now saying the NLC and TUC, in fact, the organized labor are now dogs that are barking. They keep barking and they never ever bite. The last time we saw the NLC wanting to bite in the southeastern part of the country, their chief, NLC president Joe Ajero, actually got a black eye. I don't know if you remember that incident. So, all of that. And that was even what triggered the strike at that particular time for about a week that did not even hold water. Whether you like it or not, strike action is what the NLC have in their arsenal, against the federal government. Because at the end of the day, there are lots of subsidiaries under NLC, a lot of, groups under NLC. And this, cuts across the aviation sector, the oil and gas sector, hospitals. And when you see, if all these unions, even universities as well, if they decide to join the NLC, this is crippling the entire economy. NLC is not just a group of people who just decide wants to go home or members of NLC. It cuts across several unions that are under the NLC. Well, and of course, the federal government knows the implication of that. The
strength of the NLC and the Joe Ajero-led NLC is that which is left to be seen, because if we remember his former comrade, Adams Oshomole, we could see the strength of that. But let's leave that for another day. We're moving on to another headline this morning. Nigeria's food production is set to hit 62 billion euros in 2024. 62 billion euros in 2024. Now, Nigeria's food production will rise by 48% to 62.6 billion euros between 2021 and 2024. This is according to Fairtrade and Otakwa. In a statement, Fairtrade and Otakwa, organizers of Nigeria Agro, Food and Plast Print Pack Trade Show, disclosed that the country's food production had improved by 39.6% from the 26 billion euros in 2016 to 36.3 billion in 2020. Now, the senior project manager at Fairtrade, Freya Detjen, noted that with investment in food and packaging technology that amounted to about 363 million euros in 2022, Nigeria stood as Africa's second largest investor, trailing only South Africa in 381 million euros and leading Egypt with 319 million as well. So basically, she said that Nigeria's food production has witnessed a remarkable surge of 39.6% in the recent years, from 26 billion in 2016 to 36 billion in 2020, and it's projected to rise by 48% to 62.6 billion euros. Simeon, can we trust this report? Are we seeing the economic realities?
You just took the words out of my mouth. Several times we see and we hear agencies, of government actually come out to make certain remarks like this. Then you get to ask yourself, truly, are these figures accurate? Are they manipulated figures? Or is it true that this is really happening? And for those who don't know, the organization that did put out this data is the Organization for Technology Advancement of Cold Chain in West Africa. And of course, what they basically do is monitor, food production through technology and everything, across the West African region. I get to ask myself, we've had issues of insecurity, and I know a lot of Nigerians would definitely want to dispute this particular, data by Otakwa. But who am I to actually dispute it? I haven't done my own research myself. I believe before they actually put out this figure that Nigeria food production have actually increased from what it was, about 8 years ago to $62 billion, to 62 billion pounds. I beg your pardon. Maybe, possibly, that the figure is right, but the truth is you will have to convince Nigerians to believe this, because the realities Nigerians are seeing at the moment is different from the figure we are seeing. You get to ask yourself, most of the food producing states in Nigeria are being rocked by issues of insecurity, and then you get to ask yourself, who are those farming to produce this food? Are they farming in Lagos, or are they doing the farming in Abuja? Because most of this food production states are not even, they are within the northern part of the country. So this makes this particular data by OTACCWA kind of questionable, but I'm not an authority in that. I'm not the ABS. I don't have the yardstick to actually carry out the poll.
Even the World Bank has come out to say that Borno, Adamawa, and a couple of other states in the northwest and northeast regions of the country may actually suffer food crisis due to the high levels of insecurity. This report, however, it may have been true post pre Tinubu's administration, but right now what we're seeing post subsidy removal is a different case entirely. But we'll let posterity judge this particular report. Let's see if it will hold water. I will try as much as we can to reach out to El-Rufai. It's 7:34, but do well to leave your comments on our YouTube live at Voice of the People Abuja. Go ahead and do just that. You can also reach us via calls.
And of course, let's get back to the headlines. Talking about the headlines for now, let's talk about the rising cost of food, as the federal government has ordered the release of 102,000 tons of rice, maize, millet, and gari. This is the top story on this day newspaper for today. Rising cost of food, federal government orders release of 102,000 tons of rice, maize, millet, and also, let me call it in a parlance, gari. And now to the details, which says, the federal government yesterday moved to address the high cost of food items in the country with a directive for the immediate release of 102,000 tons of rice. Okay, we now have El-Rufai Oseni online. Good morning to you, sir.
Morning, guys. How are you? Bless you all.
Great to have you on the show this morning.
Yeah, so the federal government released some grains out. I think we'd like to see how the modalities of this works, because the 102,000, 42 will come from millet and some other grains, then rice about 60,000. But they say from some of the illegal producers are going to release the rice grain. So the question is, they have as much as that in capacity. They also talked about nullifying the middlemen, But the problem is because you have a pervasive level of scarcity, that's why the middlemen can store in advance. So what's going to also be done as regards bolstering, the silo and the storage system for all the grains? I think that's another question we should be able to answer. Also, what about the legacy issues of logistics and transportation of all these products and all of that? See, you can go and check my Instagram page. I interviewed a very good friend of mine many years ago, when I was on another radio dial. I done a lot of work on export, and this guy has many degrees in export. In fact, he did a PhD research in export. And we did a 30-minute session on how Nigerians can export, and he talked about the challenges and everything. If you go to my Instagram page, you'll find it's a free masterclass. And from time to time, I'll keep breaking that, because that's my contribution to how we can bolster the naira and the currency and things like that. Because when you look at it, because our currency is already devalued, it should be a good time for our economy, as regards export and things like that. But because of the way we have not done things properly over time. So let's see how all of this goes, and let's see how we can solve these problems and ameliorate the challenges.
The question we're asking at the moment is, with this metric tons of commodities that will be released to Nigeria, the question is, will it be enough? Will it go across the country? Will it even stop the food inflation?
Will it stem the
at
tide at least until things
No, I
settle
doubt
down?
it's not going to be enough. It's not going to be enough because they even said it themselves. I think that 6,000 grains of rice is just about 3 or 4 weeks worth of injection into the market. But they've also put a caveat there that if they have to import, they will have to import. But that's also going to be higher bill because since our currency has been depressed now, the value importation bill will be higher for us. So that's another thing. I think long run we should be able to incentivize our farmers, and we should be able to have like a proper agricultural scheme. When we had this crisis in the 80s, it led to lots of agricultural settlements and everything. But the problem is with government intervention. How do we do it and become very effective? Because that's always the problem. In the end, it's managed and people do all sorts of shenanigans and the process never really gets to the end.
All right, Mr. Rufai, still on this issue of the economy.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Still on this issue of the economy, we're having Labour and federal governments clashing. At this point in time, they've issued Labour, that's a TUC, and the NLC. They've issued a 14-day strike notice once again. Mr. Rufai, at this point in time, what can we do? We always see the federal government enter into, go into the negotiating room with hopefully what we see as faith, going into the meetings like that. How exactly can we even make the government follow through with their promises at this point?
I recognize the fact of bad faith by the government, and please don't get me wrong, and I'm not happy about that. But also, Labour and their near strike experiences, or their one-day strike, and they call it up in the end, to also make mockery of the entire process. Because when we keep saying this, we expect Labour to be able to stand firm by its word and be able to do the needful. But you call a strike this meeting, the next meeting you're out of it, you're bucking the trend, one thing or the other. It just makes people start to lose hope in Labour and all of that. But federal government should beat their own part of the agreement. But at a time like this, is strike the viable option? That remains to be seen, because a lot of questions need to be asked. And how are you going to fix the economy? How are we going to do things? How are things going to move on? So there are a lot of questions that we should ask, but we should just be careful, and Labour should be careful at this time.
Okay, quickly, still talking about Labour, is this not the case of a dog always barking and never biting? And of course, Nigerians no longer trust the Nigerian Labour Congress to fight the cause of the average man on the street.
I mean, it's looking like that, because they shout, and there's no action. At least if you are going to bite. Let's see you bite.
Mr. Rufai, if these guys, what would be the effect of this strike notice on, the talks on minimum wage? There's that conversation as well, that the minimum wage is supposed to be renewed and then a new one is supposed to be signed into law. Would this have any effect on that?
No, I don't think it's going to have an effect, because the last minimum wage has long expired. All right, so this is you to craft a new minimum wage. Anyway, the last minimum was not even formed properly in the first place. But this to be able to craft a new minimum wage, I think that's not a conversation on the table. I don't think it's going to have any effect on the yeah.
All right. We're moving on to security, and we've been talking about the integrity of the Nigerian police. And right now, there's a headline on Punch newspaper that says the IG has hailed a cop for rejecting a 4 million naira bribe from drug peddlers, and they apprehended these individuals in Marugbo in Lagos State, and there was a 4 million bribe that was offered to them while they were investigating a drug deal. At this point in time, Mr. Rufai, do you think it's believable to have individuals, policemen, who are actually trustworthy?
You have some of them that are still good. Everybody can be bad, but it's just that you have lots of the very bad lots. That's just what society has become. But when you see ones among them that are very good, you commend them, and you thank them for their service, and you can only wish them the best. And that's what we do, and we truly commend this police officer. There are still good, very kind ones among them. If you meet them, you will know.
Mr. Rufai, this issue of good cop, bad cop, right? Is it something that we can fight against? Is this something that the IGP can actually fight against? Because we know that once there's... Go ahead.
Yes, you can, because what you just need to ensure is that you have an institutional acceptable limit. So if you take a ratio, make it such a very big deal in the fact that if you take a ratio, at least if you meet 10 police officers, at least if 4 are good, then the experiences will be a whole lot better. And how do you do that? You met out very tough sanctions, but apart from meeting out tough sanctions in the airing of set, but also you do your best as regards their welfare. You can't be found wanting in your welfare to them. You can't expect them to go and stay on the road and collect money to be able to fill their cars, to be able to do patrol, and expect you to be a whole lot better. No. And them to look at you and respect the forces. No. So you to do your own obligations to the cops. Once you do your obligations to the cops, you have a general acceptable limit. I mean, there are bad cops everywhere, and they are good cops, but they are institutional acceptable standard. And we also bolster the state of...
Hello?
Yeah, hello. Yeah, hello. Okay, apologies for that. We'll try to get across to Rufai Oseni so we can actually complete, his session with us right here on Front Page Review. Remember, we are also live on YouTube. Feel free to subscribe, drop a comment as well on our stream. And remember, you can also send a message on WhatsApp as well as send us a voice note as well. Okay, welcome back, Mr. Rufai.
Yes, you're saying.
Okay, let's talk about, this... troubling reports according to the IGP, and he has said that in the space of 7 weeks there have been about 172 cases of kidnapping recorded in the country. Now, looking at the figure Kayode Egbetokun released, is this not troubling? Should we not be worried as Nigerians?
I mean, the FCT is under siege with kidnappers, and we know that. The question is not just about reporting the cases. What are they doing about it? What are they doing about it? Out of those 72 cases, the number of cases reported, how much have they been able to track? How much have they been able to arrest the culprit? Is there a general syndicate that does everything? What are the groups involved and itemized? Who are they trailing? What investigation work is going on as regards these people? I think that's what we should be saying. Empirical data-driven analysis to be able to solve the problem. There will always be a problem, but you to also be on top of the problem.
All right, this issue of insecurity, Mr. Rufai, I don't know if we're seeing the federal government at this point doing all that it should be doing in ensuring that there's a successful end to this. What else can we do additionally? Or are we just having a situation where there's no political will on the part of the government to fight?
Do more. If you are not getting the desired results, then you're not doing enough. Do more. And even if you are getting the desired results, you need to do more. But in this case, we're not even getting the desired results. Do more. Calculate empirically. Honestly. So, what is the ransom payment rate of most of these kidnappings? If the ransom payment rate is high, that means you're not doing enough. How many have you been able to squash? Okay, these SIS units you set up, what's the rate of fight for the unit? Have they been able to kidnap, apprehend the kidnappers and destroy the cartel? Do they have a database of most of the top kidnappers as we speak? So these are the questions. So if you're not getting maximum result, then you need to look inwards.
Okay, thank you for that. Quickly, let's also touch on, this. Still talking about food security in the country, but this time it is worrisome as, bread producers in the country have announced that they will be increasing their price, especially in Port Harcourt, and this will start very soon. We've seen that, even bread that used to be the food for the common man is now even becoming varied by the average Nigerian. A loaf of bread now sells for about 1,002 in different parts of the country. Do you think the federal government can do all it can to ensure to stem the tide of inflation and the rising cost of goods in the country?
And the loaf of bread is still going up to about 1,005, 2,000. So I think we should just brace up for that. There's the cost of flour that is on the increase, and most of these things are not readily available here. Also, there's really so it doesn't make sense as regards the cost benefit analysis. So that's the problem.
Mr. Rufai, at this point in time, should we not focus on the minister himself, the Minister of Agriculture, to ensure that, because this issue is a food issue, should we not focus heavily, leave the federal government and the president alone, and focus on the Ministry of Agriculture and the minister himself to put a little bit more pressure on him to do his job?
Now, wow. You think the minister can do anything without the federal government? When you say don't focus on the federal government, I'm just laughing here. The minister works for the federal government now. It's a federal government holistic plan that can stay down. If the minister writes a very beautiful plan, the federal government said, no, we are not approving the implementation. What is he going to do?
But at least let's see some of the plans. Let's see some of them.
Some of the plan. Yeah, that's a valid argument. But when you look at it, it still goes back to the federal government. And it's even beyond the minister now because it's a national crisis. I'm sure you've seen the protests everywhere as regards food. It's a national crisis. And the minister too was part of the meetings, when that were held as regards, food crisis and all of that. The minister was part of the meetings. He was part of the emergency meetings. It's the sad tale of food and insecurity in the country.
Mr. Rufai, we've had individuals who have argued that the state of the economy could have been worse if some of the reforms that the president and the policies that this particular administration had put in place, if they hadn't put those policies in place, then our economic realities could have been worse. Is there any truth to this? Because I don't
believe those arguments. I don't believe those arguments. Those arguments are not founded in any facts. It's because of even the haphazard way they carried out this reform that the economy went this way. I mean, if you had a phased removal of subsidy and you had also thought through about a devaluation, this would not be happening. You can't remove subsidy and devalue at the same time. It was not thought through. Even the president himself knows it because he said that his advisors said pull out some people, shock them in his speech. So, let's not deceive ourselves.
Okay, let's quickly talk about Nyesom Wike, the minister of the FCT. Recently has been going around, the different area councils in Abuja making remarks, and just the recent remark he made has caused a lot of stir, in the social space in Abuja, where he has said that he has never asked for any area council money to be tampered with. We know that recently, there have been backlash on several ministers talking about the Minister of Humanitarian Affairs and some other ministers who, in a way, have been, fingered for one form of corruption or the other. But Wike is trying to say, I am clean. No, I've never asked them to touch any area council money. Is this him trying to defend himself, knowing that Nigerians might actually come for him with all that is playing out in the ministries?
I mean, he has to defend himself. So if he says never touch area council money, then we'll have to see a very documented audit of how area council money is spent in Abuja, because with all that goes on as regards area council money, somebody would have expect a lot better to be done. So but it's just sad what is happening. But let's see how this pans out in Abuja. Let's see how very much more can be done. I have to run now, and I thank you guys for your time. Thank you so much for having me.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Rufai. Have a good day.
Bless you guys. Thank you.
Okay, this is still Front Page Review right here on Voice of the People 96.1 FM. In a bit, we'll also be joined by Larry, who will be giving more flesh to some more headlines that we'll be discussing this morning. Remember, we are live on YouTube. Feel free to subscribe to our page, join the conversation, drop a comment as well. And as well, send a message via WhatsApp or send us a voice note, which we'll be listening to you. 0700 010 961 961. 0700 010 961 961. We'll just take a quick breather.
Yes, let's pay some bills. We'll be back in just a moment. Stay with us.
The Week in Review, a recap of all the big headlines and stories of the week. Saturdays at 8 a.m. only on VOP 96.1 FM. Now you have a voice.
Today's sun is so hot though.
So what are you waiting for? Get the authentic taste of creamy cold berry ice cream. To order online from Gariki, call 090-8831-5907. Guarimpa 090-8831-5909. And Lugbe 090-8845-3416.
Enjoy authentic cold berry ice cream. Do you like what we do? Want to see some more of us? Head over and meet us on YouTube, Insta, and Twitter. At Voice of the People 96.1 FM. Share us on your socials. Tell everyone. Send us a message. We'd love to hear from you. Follow us at Voice of the People 96.1 FM. See ya.
I'm coming in hot.
Now, you can enjoy the original taste of premium American Romeo's Pizza. Juicy, just the way you like it. To order online from Guarimpa, call 090-8831-5908. Gariki 090-8831-5906. And Lupe 090-9238-9861. Romeo's Pizza, the pizza champions.
Coming in hot, just like the heat.
Every play, every score, and every victory is a story waiting to be told. Sports Bid. Weekdays at 8:30 a.m. Now you have a voice.
Voice of the People, 96.1 FM. You're welcome back. Front Page Review right here on Voice of the People 96.1 FM. Good morning to you just joining us. If you're just tuning in, well, you're welcome. We are live on YouTube. It's at Voice of the People Abuja. Live on YouTube at Voice of the People Abuja. Join us and let's have a conversation about what exactly is trending. Before we went on a break, we checked out a couple of headlines. We're seeing federal government and Labour differing on aborted peace deal, and Labour has issued a 14-day strike notice. So we also checked out Nigeria's food production set to hit £62 billion in 2024. This is according to Fair Trade and Otakwa. They are organizations and organizers of Nigeria Agro, Food and Plus Print Pack Trade Show, and they've talked about the fact that there's going to be a 48% rise in food production in Nigeria, even though we do not see if that's in line with our current economic realities as well. The World Bank also said Borno, Adamawa, Katsina, Kaduna, Yobe and Sokoto have been highlighted to have severe risk of food crisis. We're also seeing the IG hailing the policeman for rejecting 4 million naira bribe, and he nabbed drug peddlers as well. We're checking out a lot of other headlines, but right now we're joined by our guest this morning.
Okay, we have Larry Ogwego right now on the line. Good morning to you, Mr. Larry.
Hello, good morning, guys. How are you doing today?
We're doing fine. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, my pleasure.
All right. Let's first of all start with, there was this report that over 4 people had died watching the Super Eagles match yesterday, and doctors are warning that if you are hypertensive, avoid watching football. This is a sad development in such a happy mood that we're in.
I think Nigerians need to become a lot more literate about health matters. Unfortunately, we are not. Most of the time, we react, not just when it comes to battling insurgency and kidnapping. We just react in every area. I think we need to go beyond setting up fancy hospitals. We need to educate people about health. Incidentally, even the media. has a great role to play in that area. I was talking with a friend who's a commissioner for health, and I asked him why they don't teach people, like in the good old days, for instance, how to wash their hands and how just hand washing can affect the health of a child and even an adult. So we need to educate people. You don't just take a weak heart and all of that, and you're watching a football match and you're shouting up and down, and if the person has certain conditions, the blood pressure may spike, things may just go haywire. So I think we need more education. People need to know that you don't just do things because you enjoy doing them. You don't just exercise because everybody's running 2 kilometers every morning and you want to show that you are strong too, and you want to do 4 kilometers. The person can slump and die. So we need education. We need more education, not just in that area, but in every other area. I think this is a wake-up call for Nigerians to begin to look at health a little more differently, not just pure prevention.
Okay. Anyway, let's quickly, aside that, let's quickly hear your opinion on, the NLC proposed strike and the ultimatum, 14 days ultimatum that they've given the federal government, to revert and attend to their demands.
Honestly speaking, I'm tired of hearing about NLC and their ultimatums because nothing comes out of it. I'm just personally tired, and I'm sure that the government will also be amused. That is, they have figured a way to manage them. I don't know what it is, but somehow nothing usually comes out of it. So it's a case of just the dog barking all the time, but it doesn't get to really bite. And after some time, even thieves get used to the fact that this dog doesn't bite, so they can walk in even in broad daylight to take what they want. And that's what's happening to NLC. That's why you notice that they're going to walk into the boardroom, sign agreement, and walk away without implementing the agreements, because they know that the worst they can do is to threaten to go on strike. Worst case scenario, go on strike, a warning strike, come back, they give them another promise. And it's sad. But on the other hand, we need to begin to question the integrity of our leaders. We've been doing that for a long time, but I've always said that if you cannot meet the terms of an agreement, don't get into that agreement. Exactly. It actually tells us how too far gone our leaders are. That you sit down on the table, negotiate for days on end, and then you sign the agreement, and then you don't implement it. And you know that you're in that situation because the previous agreement was not implemented. I believe that these guys walk into those boardrooms to sign those agreements, knowing fully well within their heart that they can't or won't implement the agreements, and that's not good enough. Meanwhile, they don't sign any agreements, but they buy themselves the cars we all know about. They spend humongous amounts of money building carports for themselves and all of that. So you begin to ask yourself, at what point do we even begin to focus more on our political elites and the way they make choices? Are we going to continue like this? I don't think this is a matter of labor anymore. All of us will begin to ask, how can a man build carports with 3 billion library, 3 billion cars, 160 million per person, and then you can't pay the people who run the nation? It doesn't really add up. So beyond labor, all of us who are in this system that's been affected should begin to question the level of integrity and the sheer dishonesty and greed that is being displayed by these men and women who will just take everybody for a ride,
Mr. Larry,
at their will.
At this point in time, I wanted to just touch light on the integrity of labor. I mean, we've seen a lot of leaders of the NLC so far. We had Ayuba Awaba, we've had Adams Oshomole, we've had a couple of others as well. In this point in time, are we seeing a very, very righteous, quote unquote, a good NLC leadership? Because some people, it's been whispered in quarters that when you have issues like this where the NLC is raging and barking, right? The reason why there's no biting to that bark is because palms have been watered. That's what some people have been whispering.
Well, anybody who whispers that shouldn't be blamed. The truth is that the nation is on a downward spiral when it comes to integrity matters. And I'm one of those people who actually used to whisper. And sometimes I still believe that it's because...
Are you done whispering? Oh, you're still whispering? Go
Yes,
ahead,
I
yes.
was going to say that sometimes, you know why I said I'm one of those who used to whisper. When you look at the body language of some of them, you really wonder whether you should continue whispering or not. The present NLC boss, makes all the right noises, but then sometimes I wonder, is it really about noise making? And then I also see a situation where, if, for instance, you are willing to get the job done, you can't do the job alone. Assuming you want really to hold the government to account and say we are not working. Like I've told my friends who are labor leaders, hey guys, if you want to go on strike, go on strike. You want to shut down this country, shut it down. So we'll all sit down and talk about how the country is run. I mean, we feel pain for some time. My own analogy is simple. If you are sick and you need a surgery, when the surgery is done, you don't work for 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, sometimes 4 weeks. But when you come back, you work better and you are done with the pain. I think at some point we need to do a surgical operation on this labor matter. I tell them, look, develop the liver to shut the place down so we can really be forced to talk about it. Unfortunately, it's either they don't have the liver or their liver has been compromised by what you just mentioned. So I think at the end of the day, we have a fundamental problem, and that fundamental problem may not be far from the fact that a lot of these people are either compromised now or may have been compromised in the past. I know that at several levels, states and all that, I know quite a lot of them, even some national officers. When you look at some of their personal possessions and lifestyle, you cannot really compare those with the income they have. And then let's even talk about labor itself. Do they have the moral grounds to hold government accountable? If you look at the way labor operates in Singapore, they have businesses, they invest money in businesses, they pay dividends to people who they deduct money from their salaries. In Nigeria, I ask labor leaders all the time in personal conversations and in public, what do you do with the huge amounts of money that is contributed consistently and just for junketing and going for meetings? You don't invest money for these people. So I contribute money for 35 years to labor and all I get is meetings and strikes. Does that make sense? In other countries, they have investments, and you don't just go to the labor because you want to be protected. When you pay that much money, they have investments, you get dividends from your investment for belonging to a labor organization. So I think labor needs to also begin to reinvent itself. Part of why these guys don't take them seriously is that the same problem you have in governance, you should also have in the labor unions. They both have to clean up their acts, really.
Okay.
Because
Anyway,
when labor rises up to that moral standard where they first hold themselves accountable, it will become much easier to hold government accountable.
okay, we've seen the two bodies, that are always involved in announcing strikes and all of that and ultimatums in the country, and that's NLC and TUC. And sometime in September 2023, there were, remarks and circulars, distributed that NLC, in collaboration with TUC, were going to embark on a strike. And let's talk about the perceived, discord that Nigerians think about the NLC and TUC. One day, NLC and TUC wants to do a strike, just as we saw last year, and then TUC pulling out, allowing only NLC. The question is, do we see a cohesive body, or are these two bodies, working against each other at the end of the day?
I think you also have to begin to ask yourself, how did TUC come into existence, and who does TUC represent? If you look at the how TUC emerged on the scene, and if you look at the fact that they represent people who are more of elites, you understand that there's a fundamental difference maybe in the thinking of TUC and NLC, and it will be difficult to expect them to work well together. But I don't see why that cannot happen if they are truly labor leaders and they understand what it means to represent your constituency as labor leaders. I can understand the politics and the issues, because the same problem that our politicians are dealing with, the labor leaders are also dealing with. I've had the privilege of relating closely, very closely, to labor leaders, and I advise some of them when they have issues at a personal level that is concerning labor movements, and you find out that some of the people they represent as labor leaders do not even, like when you have a very serious labor leader who wants to get the job done, you find out that sometimes the people they represent are more interested in getting the quick fix solutions, like if the person wants to settle us, then yes, like I'll give you an example just quickly. There's a higher institution that had a problem with their staff, And some of the labor leaders we are saying, let us insist on solving this problem once and for all. We can't keep and then some of even the people they are fighting for were saying, no, if they are willing to give us this immediate handout, take it. And some were willing to, they even offer the labor leaders bribes of up to 3, 4, 5 million in cash. And so I know that there's corruption going on, and I also know that a lot of the labor leaders are not really doing labor in the spirit of Michael Imode. No, that's the truth of the matter. This is an opportunity. Just like the every politician in Nigeria didn't get into politics to serve people or to transform the nation or the state or to lead people. They get into politics to open political shops for the purpose of doing business. And that's what has happened to Labour too. It's an opportunity to grow large, to travel free of charge, to have contacts, to meet politicians, and then, if possible, migrate into politics, which we have seen in the past. And it's probably we're going to see more of that. So the purpose of Labour has been abused in itself, and you can see factionalization going on. It's going to increase. Of course, you know that before we just had Nigerian Medical Association. Now you have a rival organization in quotes, and that was bad. That was the midwife that collected, that aided the birth of that rival organization. It was the leadership of Muhammadu Buhari. There's the politicians basically wanted to weaken Nigerian Medical Association. So I think TUC also, of course, came out in the same manner. So the people, for them to work together, need to rise above the antics of the politicians and understand that they are representing people who are practically having their lives squeezed out of them. But the point is, did they go into labor with that intention?
Okay.
Most of the time, the answer is no.
Okay, quickly, let's also touch on the headline on The Sun that talks about PFN, that's the Pentecostal Fellowship of Nigeria, asking the president to declare a state of emergency on security. And the PFN actually made this call just recently. Wale Okeo is the national president of this particular group. They met in Lagos yesterday, and they asked the president to make an announcement and, of course, issue an advisory on this particular matter. Do you think this will actually help the case of insecurity in the country, because there have been calls for declaring a state of emergency in Nigeria?
I'm a very practical person. Just the verbal declaration of a state of emergency doesn't change anything. You can declare a state of emergency if you don't change the things you do, the approaches, and how you want to tackle insecurity. Nothing will change. The fact that you just mouthed the fact that we have an emergency, it won't change anything. As a matter of fact, there's a state of emergency. Even if they have not declared it, we know that there's a state of emergency. We are living in the emergency. So declaring it is just to say, when you declare it, you now allocate more funds and then more ideas. You sit down to think about what to do with insecurity. For me, it's not just about the declaration of state of emergency. We know that we have a state of emergency already, so they are not declaring it. But my problem is sometimes we don't pressurize people to do the right thing. We should be asking them to take specific steps to protect us. Even if they declare state of emergency and then don't do anything differently, nothing will change. That's the fact. So we need to begin to ask questions. What needs to be done? So when you declare state of emergency, what should you do with the declaration? How do you mobilize Nigerians, for instance, to become security conscious as individuals? Who do I call when I see strange things? How do you manage those calls? If I call and say my neighbor doesn't go to work, for instance, and he lives large, if you come there and you interview my neighbor says, I work virtually for a company in UK, and you apologize, I leave, I'll be happy. But if you utilize my neighbor, arrest him, extort money from him, and I later find out the outcome, I'm not likely to report any other person, because it means you don't even have the capacity to manage the information people give you. Because sometimes people will give you information on the basis of their general observations. Then it's up to you to investigate the person. But unfortunately, most of the time we don't investigate, we act before we investigate. So there are a lot of issues surrounding our security mismanagement, and declaring a state of emergency may be good, but the question becomes, what do we do after the declaration? Because the declaration alone will not make insecurity walk away.
All right, Mr. Larry, at this point in time, we're seeing NOA, that's the National Orientation Agency, right? Are we supposed to be seeing them working in tandem with the security agencies to sensitize Nigerians on what to do, how to handle themselves should they fall into situations, security situations? Who exactly can they call in that particular area? Are we not supposed to be seeing a vibrant NOA, especially during the Buhari's administration? NOA was pretty much non non-existent. We didn't see them speak, and now we're in another administration and we're seeing the same thing continue once again.
I am very sad about the National Orientation Agency. The truth is that we are like a nation without any orientation, actually. The National Orientation Agency is existing on paper now as we speak. And I think we should either decide to scrap it or make it work, because there's absolutely no orientation going on. And having said that, I think part of the problem we have is that if the NOA is going to speak, they are going to speak about values, about doing things well. They are going to mobilize all of us to begin to rise up to the work of rebuilding Nigeria, as it were. But the challenge we have is that if NOA begins to speak, this is the era of social media. We're also going to begin to ask them, are you speaking to Mr. President also? Are you speaking to the governors? Are you speaking to the legislators? So I think that's a conundrum here, because if they begin to work and say the right things, when Jerry Ghana was the boss of Mansa, he used to say a lot of things. If you're president, well. If you're senator, well. You know, he created a lot of amazing sound bites for us. And people started holding both themselves and leaders accountable. But if you say such things today, are you going to survive that, your job at NOA? That's number one. And then if you survive the job and you keep saying it, is the man you're talking to at the top going to realign and then do the right thing? So we have a big challenge. NOA can actually begin to talk about security, but if they want to talk about security, they will tell us, for instance, support security agencies. They'll also tell security agencies, respect our rights. But if you know how the police deals with us on a good day, it will be difficult for a normal Nigerian to cooperate with a police station. I train policemen, I talk with them consistently, and I tell them that the only way we can win the war against crime and insurgency and insecurity is that they engage their most effective allies, and the most effective allies are the ordinary people in other climes, even where they have sophisticated gadgets. They get information from people. In Nigeria, they alienate the people so much that the people perceive the police as enemies, and that's how they started telling us that police is your friend. And a lot of people reject that overture vehemently. They say, you are not my friend, you don't treat me like a friend. So NOA has a very difficult job of managing a country where the leaders behave in such a way that it's extremely difficult to preach to the citizens to behave well. When the leaders who should be role models to them are not behaving well.
Okay, Mr. Larry, you asked, a critical question. Still talking about the NOA, will they survive their job? Now, with subsequent administration, even before this particular time, even before 2015, we saw how Nigerians were vibrant, calling out, their leaders and, extracting accountability from them. But since the inception of, starting administration from 2015 till this particular time, we haven't heard, a lot of Nigerians speaking as regards the issues affecting them. What is happening? Is it that Nigerians can no longer speak, or is it that their voices have been clamped down, or what is happening? Why are Nigerians not speaking as we saw in previous administration before 2015?
They are still speaking, but they are speaking in hushed voices. When you have problems, you don't want to compound your problems. One of the primary pillars of democracy is the freedom of expression. You should be able to express yourself and call out anybody that you need to call out. You need to be able to tell people to their faces what they are doing wrong. You need to be able to tell truth to power. But unfortunately, we had a misadventure from 2015 where journalists started going to jail. People were manhandled and maltreated for just saying the basic things that some other political leaders in the same country wouldn't have even noticed. So when you get to that point, you have to make a choice. Are you willing to compound your problems by speaking up? Now that's how the ordinary man thinks, by speaking up, and then you are picked up. Or are you willing to speak up in hushed tones? So just for the purpose of venting, you speak up in your bedroom or in a pub or in a lounge. So when you finish venting, you go home. Now Nigerians have moved to that era of just venting in private, which is not good for democracy. One of the things I tell political leaders, sometimes they complain about me too. They complain about me. Sometimes we even go for functions. They complain about me openly. And I explain to them, and listen to this, this is very important. When a man does not allow people to say their bit, the man actually is in the process of breaking his mirror. I tell political leaders and other persons that I'm a mirror. What I do is to tell you how you are, at least how we see you. My words reflect how we perceive you. If you break me, you have broken your mirror. And when you break your mirror, you go to the street naked. And that's what's happening to our political leaders, because they have broken most of their mirrors. The people around them are sycophants who don't tell them how things are and how they look. Many of them come to the streets naked, and we are ashamed that our politicians are walking around naked. But because they are broken their valid mirrors that don't distort images for them, what they get is what all of us are suffering now. So I think we need to get to that point where the people should also realize that calling out political leaders is not something you do if you want to do it. It's a duty in a democracy. If you don't do it responsibly, though, if you don't do it, what will happen is that you also feel the pain. In other words, you either feel the pain of calling them out, or you feel the pain of bad leadership. The first pain of calling them out is something you actually anticipate sometimes, but the pain of bad leadership, you don't even know how it will come upon you. If you don't call them out, Nigeria may just happen to you in a way you don't like. So I think people are just playing safe, and the politicians are making a huge mistake, because ultimately many of them are walking the streets naked, and they don't know it, because they're actually breaking the mirrors. They are breaking our voices, and that is one of the major and important elements of democracy, our capacity to speak out and be a mirror to our leaders.
All right, we're moving on from that, and we're moving on to the IDPs. Now, we have about 2.7 million Nigerians who've been displaced by flood and others. This is according to the National Commission for Refugees, Migrants and IDPs. They've said that 2.7 million Nigerians have been displaced due to flooding and other climate-related factors, and they reiterated their commitment towards tackling the impact of climate change. I mean, we're in another year, and very soon the raining seasons will be upon us. Have we seen the federal government do what it ought to do in ensuring that the flooding that bedeviled us last year and the year before, they've done all they can to forestall that?
I think it's an indictment on the way we do things, that every year we are talking about problems that we knew were going to come. I mean, we know that this happens. We know that people who live along the coastal lines have challenges when the rainy season comes. We know we have NIMET and other institutions that predict how the weather will happen to us and how flooding will come and all of that. But the federal government and the state governments do not really do enough. Sometimes I see a fluttering of activities. Sometimes actually you see some institutions and then some state governments make some noise and do a few things. But the question is, do they do enough in good time? And one of the things we must begin to do also is to get the people to take responsibility for their own well-being. In other words, we have to do this, we have to do that, or beyond even coming to their aid when these things happen. We need to have a exercise of getting them to understand the risk of, for instance, staying in those places. And then when we understand the risk, one of the things we don't do is social intervention, proper social intervention. We are quick to build IDP camps, but we are not quick to relocate people. For instance, I remember in those days when Morocco was destroyed, nobody thought about the fact that human beings live there. If you want to remove people from where they are because they are at risk, common sense dictates that you should move them elsewhere. In countries like South Africa and India, it's a fundamental right that you cannot destroy my house without giving me an alternative place to live, even if it's a fancy. And we need to get to that point where you don't just tell people, don't live here. So where do I live? When these elites want to get into governance, I notice that they provide for themselves within days. Once a National Assembly member wins the election, they make provisions for everything he needs, ostensibly to work for Nigeria. But the quality of work they are doing for us makes you begin to wonder. And then you ask yourself, if they are so quick to provide those things for themselves, why not for other Nigerians? So I think they can do more, especially in the area of planning ahead of time, keeping up the tempo, not just waiting for when the rain's about to come or when you have predictions from the weather institutions. You now begin to run around. We need to keep it up, consistent, and say these are risks to our people. And then you need to begin to have a plan to relocate people who are in areas that will necessarily suffer. Part of the money you use to feed them free of charge, disrupt academic work in primary schools where you lodge them temporarily. You can use part of that money to begin to make provisions for them to leave those places. But the problem we have, like I've always said, is that we don't put on our thinking cap. One of the commodities that is very scarce in Nigeria is the capacity to think. People don't like thinking, they like acting, because it's easier, they just respond. And we also like emergencies, because when there are emergencies, we set up task forces, and when we set up task forces, we have loopholes to do what Nigerians know how to do well. Not all Nigerians.
Okay, remember,
want to do that. Monies can fly away.
Okay, remember, we're live on YouTube. Feel free to join the conversation at Voice of the People Abuja is the YouTube page. You can also drop a comment right there on that platform. Quickly, Larry, let's talk about this particular one as well, because time is far spent. And on Nigerian Tribune, it says enforce executive order on patronage of Nigerian-made product. Reps tell federal government. And the writer says it wants security agencies to purchase locally made fabric. And basically, this particular, move by the House of Reps is in compliance with a particular executive order of 2017. It's known as the Executive Order 003. Before I ask you the question, let me just flesh out the order in case you might be privy to it. The order basically was signed in 2017, and it is made basically to support local content in public procurement by the federal government. And it's a good one, that the legislators are trying to do this. But it is ironical as well to know that the legislators are now pushing for police officers and uniform men to buy locally made fabric. But the same legislators are the one that ordered Toyota SUV. Is Toyota produced in Nigeria? Is this not ironical?
Well, yes, I think you just took that right out of my mouth, and that's why I spoke about moral standing before. Sometimes there are some things our leaders don't talk about. There are some things they don't do because they know that they don't have the moral standing to sermonize on those topics. I don't think we should be talking about policemen buying uniforms alone. It makes me feel very bad. This is a song I've been singing for God knows how long, and most people are not just listening. Go to the offices of a lot of Nigerian political elites. You see imported furniture. You see imported electronics. You see everything there. All of them are fancy brands that are imported. You don't need to import furniture into Nigeria. I've said that millions of times. We make quality furniture in Nigeria. We make world-class furniture. Why our government would patronize furniture from outside Nigeria beats my imagination. We don't need to import cars. India built their Tata brand to become a global brand through local patronage. That's what other countries did also. In Nigeria, we are quick to import anything and everything. So this executive order interpretation and implementation shouldn't be just about police uniforms. It should also be about buying vehicles, buying furniture, having a list of Nigerian products that are good enough. And those ones that are not good enough, you give them standards and support them. We have Bank of Industry, we have several other institutions that can support them to move up the ladder and do better. And when they begin to meet the needs of Nigerians, they can also export to the West African sub-region. So it's like you have a log in your eye and you're telling another person to remove a speck. The National Assemblies are not doing well as far as I'm concerned, and as far as we all know, when it comes to patronizing made in Nigerian goods. And then you are telling another person to buy uniforms. I mentioned just yesterday about the example of buying made in Nigeria school uniforms. And they are talking about police uniforms. Good and fine, but let them also put their own their own patronage where their mouth is. They shouldn't just tell police to buy. They should also make it possible for every other person to begin to think in that way. Even in their mode of dressing, they should demonstrate some pride in the fact that they are Nigerians. I'm not seeing enough of that. They should patronize local tailors. If you're putting on a suit, get a Nigerian designer to make your suit. If you're putting on shoes, let's all go to buy made in Aba shoes. Some of them are pretty much
Really
good.
good.
And when we begin to patronize these guys, what will happen is that young people who are educated will begin to build brands around some of those products, and then after some time we also begin to export. Like Turkey just came into the trade a few years ago, and they're exporting. So I think they need to rise above just telling the police to buy uniforms. They need to also ask, why is DICON not working, Defense Industry Corporation of Nigeria? Why wouldn't they think of police also using guns that are made in Nigeria? So why is DICON redundant? If they have converted DICON to a furniture company, this is a company that was already moving towards making Nigeria self-sufficient in small arms production. So they are not thinking. I keep going back to this issue of thinking. If they want to help Nigeria, they need to sit down and think about all these their political games about who heads what committee. They have names for juicy committees and all that. No, they should sit down and plan seriously how to salvage this country. So if they want us to do local content, they should know what to do. They should sit down and ask, where is our money going? Why shouldn't we be able to produce more arms at DICON? We already have the Defense Industry Corporation there. Why shouldn't we be able to help some of the local manufacturers of vehicles to do better? If we start patronizing them and give them a minimum standard, they will upgrade. Why can't we have them forge partnerships with some other bigger companies abroad so that we can buy vehicles made in Nigeria? We were buying Porsche before in Nigeria. So why can't we use a made in Nigeria vehicle? It's because of the mindset of our people. People get into politics to not only make money, but to enjoy a new status. So one of the things that demonstrates that you're a successful politician in Nigeria today is to drive a Prado SUV. And if your rank actually moves a little further up, you should have a bulletproof Prado SUV. But if you are really a big boy, you should have an armor plated. And that's how Nigeria works. So until we get out of that mindset and be able to identify with our people, we can make progress.
Okay, thank
All
you,
right.
Larry. I guess
Thank you so
Innocent
much,
cannot produce, armored vehicle. A lot of questions. Thank you so much, Larry, for joining us today.
Mr.